Hey, I'm here with Kristoffer Mugrage. Kris is a good friend of mine. He's a good runner. He just ran 2:15 in the marathon. We were teammates at Adams State, and Kris also is an instructor in exercise science at Adams State. Kris, how's it going?
Good, man. Excited to be here.
Sweet, sweet. So, tell me about first. Let's just get into like how's running going? How's life been the last few years?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been a bit rocky, I would say. Just recently, 2 weeks ago now, I ran the marathon project and ran 2:14:59. And so that was like a 18-second PR from 2022 at CIM, where I ran like 2:15:17. Um, and yeah, it's good. It's good to be back at this level again after about 3 years, where I had like my first injury in 2023, and then decided to take like a year and a half off of marathoning to try something different. After Boston 2024, and kind of like tried a lot of different things, and now then kind of decided I need to get back to like marathoning, and now it's just good to be back at this place and working towards goals and have the Olympic trials qualifier like done and out of the way so I can focus on kind of pushing myself more rather than being a little bit cautious. But yeah, things running's going great. Life is great. So yeah, I can't complain.
I admire you as a runner, because you've just in my mind I didn't even realize you had sort of like a dip in performance in the last few years. In my mind, I've seen you just as a runner just get better every year for like 10 years. And you're someone that just shows that like consistently sticking to it and consistently doing what you know works helps you get better and better. So I'm just going to kind of rattle off some of like your progression over the years, and then maybe you could talk about a little bit of that. So first, I've got your high school 5K PB was 16:26. You went to Adams State after going to JUCO. You ran 14:50 while at Adams, and then now as a professional, you ran 14:19. So like a couple minute jump over the years. Got your college 10K at 31:10. You ran 30:25 post collegiately, and then in the last few years, you ran 29:19. Another huge jump. In the half marathon, going from like 109 to 106. And then in the marathon, your debut in 2018 was 2:20:01, and then recently, like you said, you ran 2:14:59. So another 5 minute jump in the marathon. Yeah, like oh, and this one I have a fun one here. So the Joe V Hill invite at Adams State is always like the season opener. Everyone puts a lot of pressure and weight on it, how you do on that. And so in 2015 at the V Hill invite, you ran 26:01. And then this year, or this last year, 2025, as part of a huge workout, you ran, I know, like some tempo miles first, might have done some other stuff in between, and then finished it off running 24:48 for that 8K.
Mhm.
So I just thought that
Yep.
was like, I mean, you're looking at over a minute improvement as part of like a 10-mile session versus 10 years ago, you're running that all out, trying to make the travel team running 26 flat. So can
Yeah,
you talk just a
exactly.
little bit about like those huge jumps over the years, or not even huge jumps, but incremental jumps that have added up to like these huge differences?
Yeah, I think it's just working. I think just staying consistent over that like entire time, and figuring out what kind of athlete I was like back in, especially in college and in high school. It was, I mean, mainly in college, it was such like I wanted to be in the glory events, right? Like I wanted to be a 1500 guy, steepler, or 3K, 5K guy. But it took me until after college to figure out that like I am an aerobic monster. I can handle a lot of high mileage. I don't get hurt and that kind of stuff. And so I think like and sticking at it obviously over time, trying to get like improvement and just like stacking miles over over the years has led to that, until I would say probably in the last 7 years when I figured out like that I can, like I said, take a lot of mileage, take can be really consistent, know how to like listen to my body, and like when I can push, and figuring out that like anaerobic work is, and like speed stuff isn't my strength, but I can, but like the deeper I get into a really big workout, like that V Hill workout, the better I get like in those types of workouts. I think that's what has led to me to be really successful in the marathon. So um, yeah, I would say like it's just like the consistency, and I think just trying to figure myself out every year, and like and know that I in college, like you're just surrounded. We were surrounded by such good other runners and athletes, and milers and mid distance guys, that you're like, I like that's what I want to be. And it took me so long to do the 10K and realize that like, okay, this is like my event, and like then to do the longer races, road races, and get into that stuff, just took time. And but I think sticking at it was like the biggest thing, and not really giving up. And there's a lot of other things that kind of happened during that, but that's kind of my first like reaction to that.
Right. Do you think that you thought you could be really good at the mid distance events because of your body type? So if you can't tell from looking at Kris, he's 6'3" and like pretty muscular. So like you and our teammate Oliver Aitchison, you guys look
Mm-hmm.
like you could have been brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a tall, strong dude, and he's like a 358 miler. Do you think that's part of it? Is like I feel like a coach looking at you would say like, oh, obviously this guy's going to run the 1500.
Yeah, I think so. Like you, there was always a joke like in maybe like in college, and maybe just after college, like there'd be pictures of us. I remember specifically we were at Club Cross, and we're all taking, like all of us alumni are like in 2021. We took a picture together, and there was like 3 or 4 comments, and it was right after the race, and everyone's like, "Geez, Kris, look at your calves," and like all this stuff of like I have massive calves, and like very muscular person. But yeah, compared to that, people would look at me and be like, "Oh, probably like a 1500 guy," or like or why is this 6'3", 6'4" guy in the marathon or the 10K, and like is a foot and a half taller than everyone else? Like, because I think it not that like I ever have really tried to lose weight, but it's like I'm just a bigger guy, and so like I just carry more weight, and I think you know partly due with like genetics, I just easily put on muscle and can like hold muscle. So, uh, and I think so there's that part of like, oh well, he has a lot of muscle, I can have a lot of speed. And I think maybe back in Washington when I was at sea level, and it was kind of easier to work on that stuff, and it wasn't as hard as being at 7,500 feet. uh I kind of like leaned into that more. And but I think from a young age, it's like every kid's dream of like, oh, like I want to be 1,500 like guy, or 5K, and like those, like I said, those kind of glory events or glory distances that everyone like, because nobody, the general population doesn't really sit down to watch a full 10K or a
Right.
marathon or something like that.
Right. I think I can name like every 1500-meter Olympic champion back to like 1972 or 76.
Mhm.
Um, and I can probably only name like three or four 10K champions, or I don't even know the marathon champions. And like those are the events that I ran and I was better at. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's like the 1500 is kind of what everyone wants to be good at, and it's maybe the most fun to watch, so that's part of it. Um, I want to talk a little bit about, like you said, you're a big guy and you're training at 7,500 feet, and you sometimes put in like 130-mile weeks of running. Um, so metabolically, like the cost of that, and did it take you a while to kind of learn how to fuel yourself for like how much energy that takes?
Yeah, I would say like for fueling, and maybe you can comment on this, like because you've known me since like college, and we like room together a lot, like on trips and stuff. But it's like I always like eat a lot. I think that's part of like me being a bigger guy and having a lot of muscle. It's like I burn a lot of energy. Um, and so I've never really restricted myself on fueling, but I think learning how to fuel during like especially longer runs and things like that is something everybody has to learn, and I definitely learned that over the years. But that's kind of that idea of yeah, figuring out what I need to do to like fuel well and like and knowing that like because of my body type and how much muscle I have, I'm going to burn a lot more calories. And so just making sure I'm always fueling, eating enough. I don't really look at like how much I'm eating or not necessarily how much, but like what I'm eating, as long as I'm just getting calories in and like, I have found out like the routines and things that work for me, um, for that. So yeah, it's just taking time, but I think, uh, and like a lot of, mistakes or lessons learned over the years too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so yeah, like when I ran my first marathon, I texted you to ask
Mhm.
how you fueled for yours, because I was like I know Kris has had to figure this out and had to make sure to get enough calories in during a marathon. And so I think all I did was like whatever you told me, I just did the same thing, only minus like 20% of calories and 20% of the fluid because that's probably about the size difference that we have.
Yeah.
And it worked out pretty well. You're like a huge sports science nerd. Like you teach it, you studied it in college,
Mhm.
and so you're often like the first person I'll text if I have a sports science question. If I'm like, hey, like there's this new study out or there's something going on, and um, if I want to know what's up with it, like I always text you because you're just super into it. And I think that's part of what's made you successful over the years is if you don't know something, you go out and learn it.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
let's take a step back. Kind of, you mentioned like some of the training you did in high school, or JUCO, and some more speed-based stuff. And so could you talk a little bit about that and how it kind of set you up to go to Adams, or if there's anything that you still keep from that time?
Yeah, definitely. I I graduated high school in 2012. I went to a small like 2A high school, like 800 students in Lakewood, Washington, or Lakewood High School, which is like near like Arlington, Washington. Um, and I had a great, just like culture with my high school team. Really good, like just fun high school team. Made running like really fun, really good team culture. Uh, and I I would say like we were very like strength based. We didn't really focus too much on. I mean, we did speed when we needed to and things, but in freshman year, I was probably doing like 40, 50 miles, and then by senior year, I worked up to like 70, 75 miles a week. Um, and so that led into going to like I went to junior college, Everett Community College, just like down the road from where I lived for a year and a half, and then transferred to Adams, and those kind of all led into each other with like following lots of threshold work, strength, higher mileage, and that kind of like led me to where I was. But with with like training in high school, like I said, had a solid team. Like we just it was very like tradition based, and because we had like I think my high school up until like my junior year, we had like the second longest uh streak of making it to state, out of like the entire out of entire Washington state. We had, you know, just this good culture and tradition of being successful. And my coach, who my high school coach actually coaches me now, um, he he's like a student of the sport, loves it, loves helping like athletes and in all these different ways. And so I would say, um, I yeah, there's a lot of things that like I've taken from that. Mainly, it's like not things I've learned about myself, but also um, just like what I enjoy about running, and have developed a deep love for it from like my freshman year of of high school, because before before high school I mainly played soccer. I played soccer all my life, and then that, I think that's most runners. We kind of like have some different sport that we played, maybe endurance based, and then it kind of transitioned into running. And then kind of went full send into it after my freshman year of high school. And so, yeah, like, are you asking about like workouts and stuff like that?
Yeah, if you want to talk about workouts, like if there's anything you really liked that you still do, or that you feel like, oh, like that type of work really set me up to do well.
Hmm. Hmm. I think, I mean, from a young age, like always wanting to do more. Like my high school coach would always call us thoroughbreds, like that we had just always like are trying to like push ourselves and wanting to do more, and like seeking, the next step to get better, those types of things. And so, um, I think wanting to do more mileage, do more workouts, harder workouts. I mean, we did a lot, like I said, strength based stuff. So it was like I have a terrible memory when it comes to like even college and like high school about like what we did, but I know we did like um, Tuesdays, if I remember this correctly. It was like Mondays were long run days, and like by my senior year, I was up to like 14 miles or 90 to 95 minutes. But we did a lot of things off of minutes back then. So, my coach would give like, minutes and kind of roughly what the mileage you needed to hit. But we never, this was back in, when GPS watches weren't like a thing yet. And so, uh, just kind of going off mainly like lots of time, Monday long runs. Tuesday was like our interval days, and it'd be like, stuff on the track, or we'd go up to, we called it Hughes Hill. So we do like hill repeats up this like 400-meter hill, about like a mile away from campus. And then Fridays were like typical, you know, tempo days. So that loosely, you know, reflects kind of what we did in college. Um, and my coach, like I said, student sport, he would take, and he still kind of does this, in the I, I don't know if he came out when you were on the team. Maybe you had
Uh,
met my high school coach.
Maybe at a meet, just like say hi quickly, or maybe like I think it might have come down to like the Portland Track Fest. What's your
Yeah,
coach's name, by the way, for anyone listening?
Jeff Sowards.
Okay.
Hmm. He in 2016, I believe, he came out for like a long weekend, and he sat down with Coach Maurten, and he like picked his brain for like a day. And he's done that with like Scott Simmons and a lot of different other like well-known coaches, and he's done that over the years. He did that with V Hill back in like the 90s. He came out to, I think, like a national meet, track nationals in like Vancouver, up in Washington, and like sat with Coach V Hill. And so he's like always been trying to learn, and I think that's where that training style kind of like had some inspiration from V Hill and those things. So, but like as far as like workouts, it's a lot of just like, from what I remember from high school, is just like a lot of strength based boring work. Like we're doing 400 repeats, we're doing mile repeats, for tempo on Fridays, um, that kind of stuff. We would, do a lot of stuff on the track. We hosted, my high school hosts the largest uh, cross country meet in Washington State. So it's called the Hole in the Wall, and so they have like 140 schools come to it. And so we we've hosted that for I don't know how many years now, like 30 plus years. And so we would do lots of workouts like on our course, which is like on our campus, um, those types of things, and like and just different fun workouts. I mean, you know, there's one called like the 2-man loop, where we'd run this like loop around in the forest, um, different like fartlek styles like that. Uh, the ones that stood out to me, especially when I was like younger and I had more speed, like we would do uh 300s, but my coach, like my senior year, got inspired by one of the coaches he had met with or had read that we started introducing like hammers. So you
Hmm.
do like, 16 by 300, but on the eighth and the 13th one, you would go all out, right? Um, and that like that's the type of workout that kind of like stuck out to me because I was new and it was very hard. When you're doing 300s with only 100-meter jog in between doing that. And so, um,
So when I was coaching college kids, I got really tired of college kids always, high school kids and college kids, like they always want to kick the last rep and like their
mhm.
last, if they have 10 400s, the 10th one is like the hardest one. Um, so I would pick like the eighth or the ninth one and say like this one better be your fastest. And like kind of try to teach them to like work hard at different parts of the workout versus just the end.
Yeah. And I think with that too, it's like, I asked my coach this actually like a month or two ago because he was telling me about like the workouts he's having the high schoolers do, and I was like, how like why why do you give them such like variations in workouts, these kind of like really fun and stuff like workouts, and you just give me like we just do a lot of boring 10 by a K, stuff like that, and he was like, well, you got to keep them like interested and like and focused and keep things kind of fun where it kind of is different, with the different levels that you coach. But so I thought like that's kind of some of the stuff in high school that stuck out to me, and just slowly building over the years, going from a lot of the same things that we did in college. My coach would have packets, summer training packets for freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Um, and always trying to get like the next year above than what you actually were supposed to get. Uh, and so, yeah, I would say that's like a lot of my base from high school. We didn't do, and I mean, like how much mileage did you run in high school?
I ran 30 or 40 miles a week for 3 months out of the year.
Okay.
And then the rest of the year, I didn't run. but but yeah, so it sounds like you had. I mean, it's all like perspective, right? Like, um, it sounds like you had a pretty well developed program, but like you don't know what others are doing. Like I thought I was
Exactly.
working really hard. Like one summer I ran 50 miles a week, and I was like, well, that's it. Like I'm gonna be a state champ this year, and really not, I was no better than I was the year before, running like 30 miles a week every now and then.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's just kind of perspective, and it sounds like you had a coach who was, like you said, a student of the sport and like really trying to build you guys up for long-term success.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that, you know, and how I got to from college, how I got to Adams, is again just through like I feel like my entire career has been connected through just people that I know and like through running and things like that because the uh I went to Everett. My dad was big on like college is expensive, you're gonna go to Everett for the first 2 years and like save a bunch of money and things like that. And so I was like, okay, yeah, sounds good. And then finished up at Everett, and I was like, I want to go D1. I want to be like, like that everyone's kid's dream at that point. So I was looking at a lot of that, but my high school coach had told me that about Adams State. Um, and there's a alumni of my high school, uh, Andy Levere, who actually ended up being he was the Alamosa High School principal,
Okay.
when I first got here. So he's an alumni from my high school. He came here in the 90s, kind of right when like V Hill retired and like Coach Maurten started kind of taking over from like, was that like 94 to 96? And then he ended up staying here. But I got wind of that, talked to Andy, came out and visited. And then, this is in 20, it was like July of 2014. My dad and I drove out to Alamosa, um, met with Coach Maurten, saw the big wall of like national trophies and everything, And after the visit, me and my dad are like, doing the 21-hour drive home, and he's like, "Yeah, I should have sent you here like right after high school, like kind of thing." And so, because he like saw it all and was really impressed, and so, that's kind of like the connections I had made, or had from getting from like little old Lakewood to little old Alamosa, Colorado.
So you spent 2 years at JUCO?
Yeah, so I spent I did a year and a half at JUCO,
Okay.
finished my AA, took a semester off, and like just
Okay.
trained and worked and saved money to go to uh to Adams. So
Yeah. Do you think you needed that time to develop as a runner? Like I was not a good enough runner out of high school or even out of junior college to
mhm,
like to really be competitive at all at Adams or in Division Two. So like I took a few years to work. I was 25 when I went to Adams. And then like I remember when I got to Adams, so you'd been there for a year, but I think you had
mhm,
maybe redshirted 1 or 2
mhm.
seasons. Um, and we were we were always about like similar fitness, similar level. So do you think if you had come straight out of high school, do you think you would have just stepped up your game right away, or do you feel like you benefited from those couple of years?
I think I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, right? Like I think I would have maybe stepped up my game and like gotten a little bit better, within those first 2 years. Uh, but I would say like I did make a big jump from like senior year of high school to even like my first semester of college, like just training with, um, because my whole senior year I trained by myself pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And then, get to college and now you're training with people that like you can train with and they're going to push you. Um, and, and I don't know. I don't know what's to say if I went when like, in 20, what is that, fall 2012, had gone straight to Adams, like, would I don't know. It's hard to say because it's like I enjoyed my time at my JUCO for like so much and like the friends that I made and like it further developed my love for the sport. Even though we didn't win like we didn't go on to like win a JUCO national title or anything. It's kind of we were just in our own little bubble up in the Pacific Northwest. Um, I who says that like if I would have gone to Adams, maybe I would have gotten like demoralized because of like how many good people were there and like maybe I wouldn't have ran as well or vice versa. Maybe I would have, in that first year I ran like ran like a minute faster my freshman year of college, ran like 15:35 or something in the 5K on the track, after my first season of cross country, and then who says I couldn't have run, faster than that with a better system at altitude, those types of things. But um, there's a lot of things I think, I like I said, I learned over the years about my body and what works for me, and like, I'm a little bit different. Like my body works a little bit different than maybe like most people or how it's structured, especially at altitude.
Right, right. Okay, so let's talk about kind of like how you work at altitude. Maybe we can talk about some of the Adams State training. Um, I don't want to bore everyone by going over, like I talked to Sydney and Jackson a bit about like, yes, every Friday we did a threshold run.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought maybe it'd be fun to, since you're an exercise science teacher there, maybe we could talk about some of those workouts and could you give like a little more like in depth about why they work or like what's going on physiologically a little bit?
Yeah, I could try
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. No, you're always. I mean,
No,
you're a good teacher. I remember even when we were both just like grad assistants. You did a good job.
yeah,
So
I appreciate
let's
it.
talk about like maybe just go over like a typical week when you were in college, and then
Right.
kind of like what runs you're doing, how long they are, and like what's happening with each of those different types of sessions.
Mhm. For sure. Um, as people have probably heard on the pod so far, like, typical week, Sunday long run, Tuesday interval workout. Wednesday would be like a mountain run, especially in like cross country. So like a medium midweek, medium long run, and then Friday is your tempo. Um, I mean, starting with the long run, we're looking at anywhere from, depending on what event type you were and like year, from first year to fifth year, anywhere from like 12 to 18 to 20 miles for those 10K, uh, you know, upper level um, athletes. So yeah, 12 to 20 miles, and the goal with that, with what coach was explaining to us is that we're going out there and a lot of people would go out and treat it as like a recovery run because most athletes don't like long runs. But they, but the point is like building that mitochondria over the long period of time, which mitochondria is used to create, break down and create energy, ATP for us for our working muscles. And so, uh, by being out there for longer, we're creating more mitochondria. The more, mitochondrial density that we have, the more energy we can produce for longer, and that sort of thing. And teaching our bodies to, you know, use fat, as a fuel source for those long runs, and then also like then converting to using carbohydrate, glucose. If said athletes have fueled well enough, the night before or previous, like that morning, those types of things. Um, and so, that's typically, I got up to, I mean, we did a lot of our runs together in college. So, we were doing 16, 18 mile long runs, more controlled, running the first. I remember in college, we ran like the whole team, the whole top guys team, or like top 10, 15 guys would run together for the first 10 miles. And then you get to the 10-mile mark, and then it's like either you're going straight or you're going left. And then people kind of start to slowly pick it up. But it wasn't anything drastic as like, I feel like what people do now. But you're kind of just holding a solid pace, not trying to run like too easy, but keeping your heart rate up for those long periods of time. And like you and Sid had talked in the last pod of, we would stop, get water breaks, that type of thing. So that kind of helped with like the longer runs, especially being at altitude. Um, and
And
then,
so running it like not just jogging the whole time, but running it a bit faster is what helps build like more density of mitochondria.
I I would say like duration of the long run like is going to
Okay.
be the biggest thing, but also like, like I said, a lot of people would go out there and just run like their easy pace for it. But
Hmm.
if, you kind of want it to be a little bit more like moderate, like back, we would run like, our easy days at, 7:30 pace or 7 minutes, like with the team. And then, we'd go into long run and maybe we're running like 7 to 6:30 and maybe get down to like 6:15 back then, towards the end. But we're not like, obviously tempoing at like 5:20 or 5:30 that we were doing. And so finding that, you're hitting on those different intensities, but that I think the biggest thing for mitochondrial density and increasing that is just time on feet, is the big
Okay.
one.
Okay. So yeah, and now they would call it zone two. I don't think
Mhm.
we knew what zone two was. Uh, I never heard that phrase in 2015.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, spending a couple hours in zone two pretty much, or
Yeah.
maybe the second half in that like
Hmm.
upper end of zone two.
Yeah.
Cool. So then let's talk about just like a Monday or Thursday or Saturday super easy day. What's going on?
Yeah. We're just, coach having practice at 6 a.m. or 6:30 or whatever it was, rushing to practice,
Yep.
early, and just going out, and we would, jog as a team for, uh, 30 to 40 minutes, and then come back in the afternoon and 2:30 practice or whatever time it was, um, running for, and everything back then was, we did everything at like minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do now, but yeah, it would be like 70 minutes. And
Hmm.
um, one week that might be like we're running, everyone's excited and running 6:45 pace, or we're running 9 minute pace and like going to the river and like skipping rocks and just kind of like really just moseying through that time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I was, I feel like looking at like the team now compared to when we were on the team, like I felt like we ran as like a group of guys more often than like what the team does now. Like everyone kind of just goes and runs their own paces where, yeah, like Thursdays were like rock throwing days. So we'd run out to the sewers and like throw rocks and spend 10 minutes standing doing that. And, but you know, that had its purpose because of what we're doing at 7,500 feet and the need for recovery. And so we worked out really hard, but especially in those first few years, we as a team, I think, besides a few different guys, like would run pretty easy, relatively easy. And again, this is like still at the beginning, or like as GPS watches are getting, introduced more and more between like 2015 to 2018 when we were on the team. Um,
Do you think that has an effect? Like, do you think that's part of why you see fewer college and high school kids like running together? Is there they know what they like? They think they know what their pace is supposed to be, or that like they're worried about their Strava or something?
I think it's just the amount of data that we have nowadays is that people get so obsessed with that, and it's like and all this talk about zone 2 and like what you need to be at, and where I think 10, 15 years ago a lot of people were just going off of feel, like, okay, how do I feel, like listen to my body, that type of thing, which I'm a big like advocate for, where instead we'd be back, as time has kind of gone on, people are like, well, I need to be in this zone range, or I need to be at this pace, you know, and everyone has their different paces. And I think that was some things that guys on the team ran into that problem, or the problem of like overtraining back then. Like we'd have new kids come on the team and they want to run with Tabor Stevens and Kevin Batt, but they're, Kevin and Tabor's easy pace is like this kid's, tempo pace, or just slightly off of it, or they're just not recovering enough because, they are running a little bit too fast. And so it's finding that balance of those things. But I think nowadays it's just all this information that we have, and data that we have available to us, that kind of makes people overthink training a bit too much.
Okay. Okay, thanks for the tangent. Um, so okay, so like a Tuesday interval session, or like a Tuesday fartlek. Um, what are you kind of trying to get done?
So you're just trying to like build, being able to build lactic acid, like getting that in the legs, and then being able to clear it out really quickly as well. And so, when we're on the team, you guys have talked about, or we've talked about, like Cole Park miles. Everybody's probably seen that Track All Access video about people doing the 1,525-meter miles, or Alamosa miles, at Cole Park. And so we would do a lot of those, especially at the beginning of the season, going out to, Tempo Road and doing like, I remember doing like 30, 60, 90, ladder, seconds. And so running really fast, then, interval fartlek style workouts, as well as getting on the track, when we need to start to incorporate more speed later in the season. That, that's the purpose of those Tuesday interval sessions of, building lactic, clearing it, and then over the years just doing more and more volume to like incorporate that.
What was one of your favorites? I'll share one of mine. Um, we would do this like in the fall. We might do it as 60-second fartlek reps. We do like 4 sets of 4 times 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. And then in the track season, especially if you're running a 10K, we would do like 16 or 20 400s on the track, broken up as like sets of 4, where you're starting at like maybe 72 seconds 400 if you're like a 30-minute 10K runner, and then working down to like 65, with minute rest between the reps, and then like those sets of 4 between those, you're getting like 2 or 3 minutes of rest. Um, to me, that's one of the workouts I feel like I just got so much benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, because you're going too fast to not produce lactic acid. Like it's too fast to clear it. But then you get that minute to clear it, and then when you just need it, you finally get that 3 minutes to clear it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like one of my favorites. Could you name one or two of your workouts that you think like that's really helpful and anyone could benefit from that?
Yeah, I mean, I, I mean, also like when back then I mean, maybe you remember this. Like, I was terrible at interval sessions. Like Tuesday workouts, like scared me because again, like I didn't realize it back then, but like I'm not that great at like speed work, and so like I would always crush or like do really well on the long run on Sunday, and then I wouldn't recover well like in that from Monday and then Tuesday, and then we'd go work out at like 6 in the morning or in the afternoon, and then I would always kind of like struggle with those workouts. Like I mean, like mile reps at Cole Park were always like the things that I was scared of back then. But do what I liked was when we were out on Temple Road doing like those ladders or surges, and like because like I could kind of keep up on the you know more cross country like surfaces, like the uneven.
Hmm.
Uh, what are those called again? Why can't I think of it? The boards,
The washboard. Oh yeah,
the
the Tempo
washboards.
Road like
Yeah,
washboarded out. Um, yeah, I mean, you have to step on one washboard for every like three that I step on.
yeah.
um, yeah, I did. That's funny. I didn't know that. I didn't know you were like intimidated by those sessions. In my memory, it was like I was always overdoing it in those sessions because I
Hmm.
wanted to like I thought like okay, um, Sydney's a 13:35K runner. If I can hang with Sydney, I'll run close to 13:30. So I
Hmm.
would overdo it in those sessions and then pay for it. And
Yeah.
in my mind, I was like, dang, Kris is always so smart. He's always being conservative in those sessions. He's having much more consistent training. Like, I wish I could rein it in.
I was a victim of that too. Like I definitely that's why I didn't like the Tuesday sessions is because yeah, we would start really fast and then that would blow me up, and like maybe I had the strength to kind of hold on, but I'd always be kind of in like we were always like seventh to 10th guy on the team, like roughly.
Yeah.
And so that we were kind of back there, but yeah, we'd always start and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna start so fast, but that's because like now I've learned like it takes me a while to warm up, and so like I can hit those paces just once I've gotten like opened up all the pathways and things like that in a workout. But um, yeah, I mean, and being on the team back then, like everybody was just like was flexing, and like it was a dick measuring contest like on those workout days, and like uh and racing in practice like in some of those workouts, we could so many stories we could talk about with that, but
I,
I would
I,
say
I was guilty of like racing. Like in my mind,
yeah.
I would be like, I beat someone on that rep,
Hmm.
so therefore I should beat them in a race.
Yeah,
And like I was only beating myself. like
yeah, exactly.
I was only like they might have just been giving 80% because they were tired and that's what they needed that
Hmm.
day.
Yeah, yeah, we is definitely like a this is supposed to be hard, so we're gonna make it hard kind of thing. Where
Hmm.
coach had definitely had to like reel us in and like really tell us, and we had some like good leaders on the team when that did happen. But then again, egos kind of got in the way. But yeah, I would say like what I really enjoyed were those like ladder workouts out on the road. Doing stuff where we had short rest. I think that favored me a lot better. Like I said, like the 30, 60, 90, we did like, I want to say we did like even like 2 minute surges. It's all the same stuff of like different variations of like 400s, 600s, miles, like doing 5 minutes on, 3 minutes off type of thing.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Cool. And then okay, so Wednesday, like you said, is the midweek long run.
Hmm.
But you're going up to altitude. So what effect does that have?
Yeah. So some more altitude, right? So we're
Yeah, well,
going
yeah,
now
you're going
from
from 75 up to maybe 10 or 11,000 sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and so that's going to Rock Creek, or well, we never went in college to Rock Creek, but Pinos Creek, going up to 10, 11,000 feet towards the end of those runs. Um, and what Coach had told us and like still talks about is that it stimulates more red blood cell, right, production. So that's the point of going up to high or varying the level at which altitude you're at. And so um, by us changing midweek and getting a stimulus of doing 90 to 100 minutes of running at 10, 11,000 feet, the idea is there to stimulate red blood cell production by our body releasing more EPO because of that stress that's being put on the body. And so uh, that was that was what he would always tell us, and that's the purpose of changing that. I mean, same thing. Our Brandon Birdsong, who's my training partner now, he would talk about, I think when he was running for ADP, Scott Simmons, I believe is the coach there. He would have like he would tell them like go up to up in the mountains at 10, 11,000 feet and go and like sleep up there, like go camping or go like stay at a house throughout like a season to kind of help stimulate more red blood cell production, because that's the idea of why we train at altitude is it's stimulating EPO or erythropoietin to create more red blood cells so we can have greater oxygen carrying capacity when we're down at sea level.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, thanks. I really like that explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And EPO, I think most people hear that and they think of like the illegal synthetic EPO. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if a lot of people know that EPO is also a natural hormone that your body makes, and
Mm-hmm.
you can stimulate it. Um, okay, so Thursday, like you said, you're going to the dam, throwing rocks, like running super easy.
And
Um,
NCAA day, so coach
and
isn't out
oh
there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I forgot that there was like a yeah, 1 day a week you could not have a mandatory practice. But
Mm-hmm.
we just enjoyed running together as a team, so we'd all pretty much meet up anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Do that easy run, and then Friday, what's going on?
Yeah, and Friday's just our typical tempo days, especially early, in the fall, for cross country. I felt like every Friday workout was at 6 a.m. And so just because it's beautiful in Alamosa in that time and like perfect running conditions. So anywhere from I felt like, and maybe you can help me with this, like we alternated like split tempos and straight tempos every week.
Mm-hmm.
So we do like, you do 3-2-1 split tempo, and then the next week you do 6 miles straight. And then the week after that, maybe you do like 4-3, and then the week after that you do 7 miles straight. And that was typically like what we would do in the summer, and then leading into the first kind of chunk of the season. You're getting out there, and and also back then when we didn't have GPS, we had Alamosa miles, so they were 0.97, 0.98 miles. And so they're typically like 10 seconds short of a miles to kind of replicate like, okay, we hit that mile in 5:17, but really we're running like 5:30 pace.
Yeah.
And that was just kind of, again, like tradition, like V Hill did that based off of, when the stadium drive was cutting through campus, and then they changed that back in like 2010 or something when they kind of redid the campus. So those measurements were kind of on different points, and now we would just use them. But now they don't use that because now GPS is such a big thing. So
Yeah, so
um,
I have a question about that, I guess, since you've seen them train. So like for instance on our threshold runs, um, the 2 mile marker was just because there was like a fence post painted blue or yellow off on the
mhm,
side at about 2 miles. Like you said, it was
mhm.
probably more like 1.9 miles. Um, and so did they still use those traditional markers, or are they just using GPS because all the kids have GPS, so it's kind of easier?
Yeah, they're just using GPS, like, because everybody has GPS and again all that data, and so they actually don't run out on that road anymore. They don't do tempos out there. They do it around the golf course, like
On
typically.
the on the
on
golf
the
path or
dike.
just? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you run like down along the dike along the river, then you run back up towards like what is that, North River Road, and then you come
Hmm.
back down towards State Street Bridge or whatever that is, and then you
Man,
just
that
like loop that.
it makes sense. All my segments got taken away on those
Uh
roads.
huh.
No,
Yeah.
I'm teasing, but that makes
But
sense. I've seen a lot of kids
yeah.
running fast on Strava over there.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so that like Fridays were, again, me being more strength based runner, I did very well at the tempos. I liked the tempo days. Like that was, I also thought it was a great way to start our Friday. So um, going out there and, doing 6, 7, 8 miles of tempo work. Uh, yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. And so now that like I said, you're a big student of the sport. There's been a ton more like I guess it's always been there, but more people know about like LT1 and LT2 and threshold type of training, and like people are doing double threshold. Um, do you have a better understanding now of like what the intention of some of those tempo runs were?
Um, I like, yeah, like could talk to the intention of it, whether like we executed that as well as we, should have back then. But again, being right at that point of, and typically I think, back then we weren't doing double T's and we didn't really know about LT1, LT2. Um, and it was just lactate threshold, right? Like
Hmm.
coach would have, if your max heart rate is this, then it should be a certain percentage, 80, 80%, or, you know, um, he would always say like for the typical, you know, college age athlete, your heart rate range that you should try to be in is between like 168 to 172 beats per minute. Now, whether you're tachycardic or bradycardic and your heart rate is a little bit higher or you're a little bit lower, that range could be, could vary more than that. But that's what I remember from back then, him saying. And so, like, and again, GPS watches as well as like more heart rate, trying to measure heart rate. And coach had his own way of, measuring heart rate for us after workouts,
Hmm.
finding our heart rate and then counting it for 6 or 10 seconds, depending how he wanted to measure it. Um, but the idea there is, yeah, you're getting your heart rate up to the heart rate range or the intensity to which you are just starting to produce lactate, and so that's at that threshold at which your body is starting to produce, what is it? You're starting to breathe out more CO2 than oxygen you can kind of take in,
Hmm.
and you're right at that kind of like line. And that if you train at that threshold, you'll train your body to push that threshold even higher. And so we at the beginning of cross country season, we'd probably go out as a team and run like, for full actual miles, maybe 5:30 pace for our tempos. And then by the end of the season or by the end of the year, you're more people are kind of maybe running closer to like 5:20, 5:15. Um, and because you want to see that progression over long periods of time. But yeah, the idea there of just of hovering around or right below that lactate production kind of range, and um, being there as long as possible.
So I tended to want to be faster than I was. And so I would
Mm-hmm.
try to force it by being like, okay, I'm gonna run this 6 mile threshold at 5:20 pace, and even though maybe my threshold was probably like right around 5:30, and so I would probably be spending more time over my threshold than like you said, like hovering around it or under it, which then I wouldn't get the benefit as much because like my body's spending more time recovering than
Mm-hmm.
actually like learning how to process the lactate. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then so when we would go to indoors, we would try to simulate the same workouts on the indoor track, but you can't run 6 miles straight on a 230-meter track.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would break it up into like, it would be 10 by K instead of 6 miles straight, or like whatever the workout was, like 12
Yeah.
by K instead of 8 miles, whatever. Um, and I always had huge fitness improvements indoors. And then, so retrospectively, I think I was benefiting from the fact that there was a break in there that was forced. So, whereas I kept dipping over my threshold,
Mm-hmm.
that break would bring it back down. So doing more like threshold modulation.
Mm-hmm.
And anyways, I just wondered, like, I know you do a lot on the indoor track still, and like, how do you kind of incorporate that, or how do you benefit from that and play with that?
Yeah. Like you said, like doing uh I mean, it's the most I can run on the indoor track at one time is about 3 miles. So
Mm-hmm.
I can do, 3 miles in lane six, and then I have to stop, and then I'll switch directions or depending how much I'm doing. Um, but you just shorten that rest as much as like, to what is allowable there. Typically, if we're doing longer reps, um, mile, 2 mile, 3 miles, it'll be 60 seconds, so very like pretty much finish, jog over, grab some water, turn around, and then like start the rep. And that's, I think that the purpose also of kind of like, when we did that in college of doing like split tempos and straight tempos is like split tempos, you could run a little bit faster because we're going to get a break, right? We're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
4 by 2 miles with a minute or 2 minute break. So we can kind of push that threshold and be maybe a little bit over it by the end. And then you kind of clear it out in that 1 to 2 minute break. And then the same thing with, because I think, with athletes, depending on how mature they are and with training and things like that, like, we didn't, especially doing the longer stuff. Yeah, maybe we weren't mature enough to kind of like stay calm because we were like racing or trying to like prove it to each other. And so we'd kind of push a little bit harder, and then you're not in that zone and you're actually more tired, and then you have to recover more over the next, few days before the next long run or workout. Um, and then that can kind of like start to dig a hole over time, which I was I definitely did that. Overtrained in college and didn't realize it till after, and or figured out how to like really do that correctly. And then, but yeah, in the winter when I can't go outside, yeah, it's just a lot of, it's either doing, you know tempo work reps with very short rests. So we're looking at like, 30, 45, or 60 seconds recovery between, Ks, or, whatever it may be. Or you're doing on off work. So you do like, you know, I'll do tempo mile, and then do, a K or 600 at like a moderate pace recovery. So maybe I'm doing like, um, 520 pace in the bubble for a mile rep, and then I'll do 6 minute pace for a K or 600 or mile, and that's like another way to keep the heart rate up, but also train your body to kind of clear that and then come back into it. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for going like in depth on some of that. Typical week of training is Tuesday, Friday workout, Sunday long run, like 90% of other college programs. But I think there's a lot more intention in it, which is why the program is so successful.
mhm.
Um, I wanted to ask you a little bit, or tease you a little bit about. So when we were in college, you were so often like the eighth place runner on our team. So then like we take 7 to nationals, or if we're taking 9 to conference, like 10th place runner, or if we're going to the Husky invite and coach is only taking 5K runners, and 2 weeks before you run a time that places you like 6th and you don't get to go.
Mhm.
Um, and then I teased you a bit about like what your first year running the marathon, trying to qualify for the Olympic trials. You were probably the first runner in the country out of the trials. Like you ran 2:19:06, and the cutoff was
Mhm.
2:18:59. And then just recently, before you ran the marathon project, I texted you because you'd ran the Philadelphia Marathon, and the new trial standard is under 216, and you ran like 216.06.
Mm-hmm.
Or was that it, or 216.10?
216.04. So it was even closer.
216.04. Okay, 4 seconds. Yeah. And so um, like I said, like I tease you about it, about like, being always like just out of where you think you should be at that time. Um, and then eventually you always like persevere and continue to train and get there where you need to be. But did you see yourself that way? Like, as like, did you feel like you often just missed out?
Um, when I was at Adams, yes. And then, well, and since Adams, like since college, it's that has been the theme of my like running career to some degree. Um, it just always kind of being on like the other side. In 2015, I was the alternate. I always tell people this, like it's a funny fact, but in the four years, the entire time that I could have been on the team at Adams, the one year that I was on the team was the year we didn't win a national title. So, uh,
Yeah.
and so I was the alternate in 2015. You were the seventh guy.
Well, that's yeah. I mean, same year. The one year I made a national team, uh, I had a terrible race and we lost.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've yes, I remember feeling to blame for that.
Mhm.
I say we lost, like we were second team in the
Yeah,
country.
but still,
The
like, yeah.
standard was high. Um,
Mhm.
and so yeah, so like you said, you kind of felt that way about your college career. As a professional, have you felt that way too?
I mean, with kind of qualifying for things, I would say I've always kind of been on the edge with, whether it's, in 2019, I ran CIM a second time and ran 2:19.06, missed the Olympic trial standard by 6 seconds. Um, you know, that that was kind of like, as much as that sucked, it still like fueled the fire because I knew I could be there. And then, in 20, then the next Olympic cycle, they changed it to 2:18. Um, and I and then I made this big jump from 2:19.06 to 2:17 whatever, like 2:17 low when I won Columbus in 2021. And so that was like, that was after COVID and still kind of like not knowing what I was going to do. Um, and it's just kind of always been like that. Like, I'm an unsponsored like professional athlete or however you want to describe it, but I'm always kind of on the edge of like, am I going to get into this race? Like, am I going to get into the pro field? Like, I don't really know until like the very last minute because they're like, oh, well, like enough people signed up that like you didn't get in, or
Hmm.
not enough people signed up so you are in it, and kind of thing. Because you're right, I've always kind of been right on that edge of getting into, you know, big races and like that type of thing, and so, and it's not a bad thing. Like I don't trade any of that, you know, in college or what has led me to be successful or as successful as I have. Like I knew in Philly, in November when I ran 2:16.04, I wasn't worried. I was like, I get another shot to do this. I know I'm going to do it. And it's just like, I made some mistakes during the race and, um, I knew what I needed to do. And over time, I've built that belief in myself that's like, now I know I can do that. And then I went and did it. And, but that's what makes it fun. And it's like, thinking back to 2015 when that really first, kind of, I think for a lot of us that went to, in college and went to like a successful program like Adams, we're so used to being the number one guy on, our high school team or maybe our JUCO team. And then we come to Adams and you realize like, you know, uh, there's other, you're on a really competitive team. And I tell people it's like, okay, yeah, I was the alternate in 2015 for the second place team in the country. I would not trade going to be the number one runner on a different team and get like, 18th at nationals.
Hmm.
Like I wouldn't trade that. I want to be, I want to put myself in those positions to perform well and give myself those opportunities, when they're allowed. So like, when I got into, when I qualified for the 2024 Olympic trials, I, 2024 was a really fun year because I ran the trials, and then 6 weeks later, I ran Boston. I got into the Boston Pro Field for the first time, and so got to like go experience that. And so, um, I again, I wouldn't trade those setbacks or whatever you would call them, because it's made me into the athlete that I am. And like, I think adversity is really good for everybody to build resilience. And I mean, I say that, but Glassy also knows that's like coming from both of our sports psych, backgrounds. And we've taught, I teach sports psychology, applied sports psychology here at Adams, and have taken those classes as undergrad and grad students, same as Glassy. So, um, it, yeah, it's just, I think that's really important, along the way.
I think a lot of it is perspective. Like you could see yourself, like you said, as just outside of the top 7 on your college team, or you could see yourself as like on any other team, I'd be the best runner, and I don't want to be on those teams. I want to be like where I'm challenged the most. And I've always just really admired your ability to like you said, maybe because you've felt that way a lot of times, you've built that resilience. Like after after you did the Philly marathon, what was the time gap between that and marathon project? Can you remind
One
me?
month.
1 month. So yeah, you had
Hmm.
1 month. You ran 2:16, like just missed the standard. If it were me, I would have been panicked that I wasn't going to, like in my mind, I'd be like, there's no way I'm going to recover and run fast again in a month. Um, but when I called you and asked you about it, like you said, you were just like super cool about it and just like, oh yeah, like I know I'll run faster next time. Um, and I think I've seen you just like be resilient over the years and continue to just, as the standard in running gets higher and higher, you're always the person that meets it and just continues to like up your game. Um, like I'd like to talk a little bit about your training now. For instance, like you said, you know that you benefit from high mileage. Um, so then like rather than saying, okay, well I have to run so much in order to be a good runner, and I have to work, so and I have other hobbies. Um, so I'm not going to do that. Like you've just committed and you run 130 miles a week if that's what it takes.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. My training is to some people probably crazy with like how much I work and like and do, but it's also like I just know what works for me, and I've learned that you know I'm not saying that more is always better, because I have found the edge, like doing 140 miles a week at altitude just doesn't work for me. Like that's kind of like, I mean, maybe like that's my limit right now. Back in 2018 when I first started marathoning, and coach was kind of pushing us on like, just high mileage, and I could run maybe 115, 120 miles a week, but then like I would I would do that, I'd go like 110, 115, 120, and then I'd take a down week and like be totally cooked for the down week, and then
Mm-hmm.
have to like come back. Where now it's like I've done it so consistently for so long, I can run 100 and 125 to 130 miles a week for a 3 week block, take a 105-mile down week, 102-mile down week is what I've typically done, and then go straight back to 125, 130 and feel fine. And like, but that's the thing too, is like I've I have found what gives me confidence in training, and that's just like putting in really good solid work, and like, and also knowing that like, if you're training for the marathon, like you're going to be tired, and
Mm-hmm.
you got to find that balance of what is too much that is going to affect everything else in your life, and like what is not enough that you're not going to be able to like have confidence in what you're doing, and also like feel good to finish workouts. And it's a fine line, and like I feel like I've found that over the years. And so running, it's, and with training, I tell people it's as complicated as you want to make it, or it's as simple as you want to make it.
Sure. So maybe, I mean, talk a little bit about, like you said, like you found how to train that much. Um, so you work, like you teach full time.
Mhm.
You coach esports as well for Trinidad College. Um, You also do some coaching and mental skills coaching with athletes outside of those two jobs, and you're running 130, 140 maybe miles a week sometimes, which is about like what 15 hours a week of run
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
plus like weights, recovery, all that. So how have you figured out how to get all that in and still recover?
Yeah, it's I would say it's a handful of things. And maybe it's from maybe I have this, I think being just an athlete, college athlete, have gone to Adams, like, you know, I have a high work ethic and I've developed that, but also like when I was at Adams, I wasn't on scholarship. I had like maybe like a small like housing scholarship or something, but I had to work outside of that. So I'd like, have class all day, go to practice, and then I'd work at like, the Bistro Rialto that night, for my serving job or whatever it was. Um, and then have to come back and, find time to do homework and those things. And I think that I just got so used to that it's kind of uh transferred into like my adult life, and now it's like yeah, I teach, you know find time for training and trying to find recovery, and so not only just having this like high work ethic and just being used to like having that much stress be put onto me, I would say like I also know how to I know how to not allow stress to affect me in other parts of my life. Like, I think that's the big thing of like, like, who was it that talked about this? Is like training is all it is just stress, right? I think I heard this from like the Hammer and Axe podcast from like Tin Man Elite. Like, it's just your body knows stress and then you have to like recover from it, right? And so not allowing like other aspects of my life to bleed into training is like a skill that I'm really good at. Like now I can, but vice versa, it does happen where like training stress kind of bleeds into like those other aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
But I know for me, if like I just love working out, I love training, and that's like a big reason as to why I still do this. And because of like how I feel, if I get up at 6 a.m., go do my double, and then I teach, statistics and kinesiology at 8 a.m., like I feel like I've accomplished something already for the day. And then I go run another 10 miles in the afternoon, and just being really diligent with those things, but not like, and knowing that I need to get those things done. But having this skill of not letting, you know, distress kind of affect my life, and like I maybe, and you've known me for a while, but I like have a very maybe laissez-faire like personality of just like, oh, like whatever, like very like kind of relaxed, laid back. And I mean, I do take things seriously, but I don't try to let it affect me too much
Yeah,
when it comes to
I have
those things.
one specific memory um, of so we went to Spearfish for a conference meet in cross country, um, and you and I. So it's like a 13-hour drive, and
Oh
so
yeah, I know this.
we do the race. You and I both raced poorly, right? And so and you do the race. It's like takes all day to do the race, the award ceremony, everything. Get something to eat. We get back in the van, and we have a 13-hour drive back to Alamosa. And I remember because I was like so upset about how I did in the race, just being like restless the whole drive, being like unable to sleep, unable to like settle. And you sat next to me and like slept on the wall or on me like for 10 straight hours. Like it did not like I remember being like just so upset and pissed at you for having the ability to like just shut it off. And because I'm sitting here
Mhm.
going like, not only did I race poorly, now I'm not resting, and I'm gonna go and have like a terrible run tomorrow. And like in my mind, it like always like it was like this cascading effect of like this is happening and that's going to affect this and that's going to affect this. And so then I like couldn't shut it off. And I remember you just always had the ability to like well, we're in the van. Like, what am I gonna do? But like, the best thing to do is sleep. So you fell asleep. Yeah, that was like, I think I like to think of people as having like different talents aside from like when we think of talent with running, we think of like, okay, someone has fast leg speed or someone has like the ability to like race really well, and that's like sort of the small window that we put talent into. But people have all sorts of different talents that they can tap into. Like one of your talents was like your ability to rest and recover, and your ability to not let things like that bother you as much.
Yeah, exactly. And I've gotten better over the years. I mean, I those poor performances still did bother me, but I just learned
Yeah,
to like I just gonna like I had the skill of being able to sleep anywhere, like
yeah.
that kind of thing. And um and I would say like in part, and I was kind of that kind of leads into like I think genetics has to do a lot of it. Like um I don't get in like I can take a lot of stress, like I don't get injured really like anymore. I've never had an injury that's like taken me out besides
Hmm.
like 2023. I had like my first stress reaction. Um and but like I can, because and maybe that's because of like the demand of my life of like, I'll get done with a run and typically a lot of people think like, oh, well, you get done and you probably do some stretching and it's like, no, I just get done with my run, go and change clothes, and I have to go to my, meeting or my next job or like something like that. And so
Hmm.
I, I, and again, it's not that I don't want to do it, but it's like, it's just, if I was in a position where I had to be doing those things, it would probably make my training a lot harder. But it's like I can just go and run, and then you know nothing nothing has really ever bugged me, and like I can train at this high level and then just go like straight into class or the next thing I have to do, and that's not me bragging, but it's just kind of like I think a genetic thing, or like over the years I've trained my body to be able to take that stress load,
Hmm.
um, and then kind of like but that's also the downfall of me being so busy is because like I don't get to do all maybe the little things that everyone else does that can get that extra 2 to 3% out of out of their training. And like my this past build, I did weights up until like September, and then my work and teaching just got way too busy, so I didn't do any weight training for the last like 12 weeks of my build. And I could kind of feel that when I ran the marathon project. And so that's like and yeah, I mean I was running 120, 130 miles a week, but I didn't have those other little things to kind of help push my fitness to like maybe the next level that I was looking for. But I'm also not, it also gives me a lot of things that I know I can work on in the future.
Sure. Sweet. Let's talk about like some of the things that you are doing in training. Like I'd really like to know, what you're doing now and like some of the thoughts behind it. Like, what is a typical week for you now? Is it the same setup as in college, or do you take more time between sessions?
It's the same setup in college, like the same thing. Like and I, you know, Coach Maurten coached me after college up and through 2021, and then I switched to my high school coach, and I just told him I was like, well, this has been working for me. We shouldn't change anything. And then and we did that for about 2 years, and then we did kind of change some things in 2024 and beginning of 25. And then I kind of like realized that just wasn't working. And so this last build, we just went back to what worked for me, and it got me back to 216, 215 shape. And that's just like following the same things of, what I learned in college from Coach Maurten, and the team of high high volume, you know, just doing as much as I can take, Tuesday interval sessions, Wednesday mountain runs or medium long runs if I can't get to the mountains. Friday long tempos, or double T days, and then Sunday is my long run. But now compared to what I did in college, I'm a bit more cautious on how the intensity I have of those, so that I can still recover and have good workouts in between. Because like I learned over the years that like if I go too hard in a workout because I'm at altitude and like compared to everyone else, I don't recover. It takes me 2 days to recover from something rather than one day from Sunday to Tuesday. So now I have to make sure. But then again, it's finding that balance of I need to make sure I recover, but I need to still. I'm in marathon training, so I need to be tired.
Hmm.
And so it's finding that difference of like, okay, are you tired or are you fatigued? And so that's like another thing I've learned by listening to my body and like looking at my training is, you know, um, yeah, over the years, where's that limit? And then like, how do I progress that? And so, back in 2019, 2018, I'm running 110, 115 miles a week. And now that progressive overload over the last like 7 years, now I can run 120, 130 miles a week and it still feel the same, or I can recover from things like as quickly as that previous kind of stress load.
Okay.
And so,
Is that increase in volume coming just like global volume in general, like easy runs are longer, workouts are slightly longer, or are you like specifically focusing on, like you said, like maybe you're playing with double threshold, so you get a lot higher threshold volume or like higher long run volume? How are you doing that?
yeah, I would say I've typically kept my easy days always the same. And so like typically my like I do everything off of mileage. I don't do it off of time. So because that just helps me hit like the 120, 130 mile weeks. And so I'll do 10 miles, as my main run, 6 miles as my double. And that also plays into what is allowed on like most of my, work days and things like that. If I try to do more, I kind of like notice I don't have as much time to like go and change or get food and recover and those types of things between like meetings and classes. Um, so those have always kind of stayed the same, but over time, my long runs and my workouts have gotten just longer. And because I've been able to maybe run faster, and so I can get more mileage in like the time that's allowed. But yeah, over time, I would say I've kept my recovery days the same, but now my intentional workout days have just gotten longer. And like obviously the new fad of double threshold work, and like it's really easy for me to get 23, 25 miles in on a double T day if I,
Hmm.
do it, smartly and like and run the specific paces and intensity, and not overdo it. Um, Still can allow me to like recover for those.
Okay. So two questions. On Are you doing strides or how are you developing top end speed?
And that's something that I do need to work on. Like I would say I do strides every once in a while, but a lot of the times I just forget because I'm like I need to do my run and then I need to go to this thing, right? Or like I don't maybe put it in there. So um I typically work on top end speed, maybe not even, it's maybe more like VO2 max at the beginning of like a build,
Hmm.
and then it just kind of like develops and like once, I would say like once a month I'll have a Tuesday workout that's like 10K focused. But I'm not doing like a lot of speed like strides and things like that like I should be, and I know that's like another area of weakness that I have. um, but again, I know myself really well that it's like I don't necessarily need speed for the marathon. Like I know it's something I need to touch on more. But knowing my body, it's like, well, if we just go out and we do a tempo, like, if I do a 10 mile straight tempo, I know I'm going to crush the second 5 miles because, and I can get down to like 5:10 or something like that. Um,
So you feel
and
like as long as you're like occasionally running gold marathon pace or faster, that's like most of the time that's enough for you for speed.
yeah, that's, but again, that's like, if I'm just looking at just the marathon, right? Like I know my half marathon is not very fast, and I
Hmm.
haven't really worked on that too much because my focus has always been the marathon, and that's part of like, you know, me knowing that I'm a very aerobically strong athlete. I don't want to do the faster stuff too because I'm like, oh, this is really hard. Maybe I still have trauma from college kind of thing. Like, um, but but once I do start to incorporate it, and then it like my body adapts, then it becomes easier. But you know, I don't. To me, I don't really believe I need to be touching on like 65-second quarters and things like that for when I'm trying to run 5 flat pace for a marathon. But I also know that there is a need for that, but it's kind of
Right.
like this battle I have internally.
So if you had 50 hours of work less a week to do, you'd be doing strides, or you'd be doing some fast quarters?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
If my lifestyle, yeah, if work allowed for it, and I could just train or just have like a part-time job and like have more time, then yeah, I would do that.
Okay. Okay. And then my second question was, you mentioned doing some double threshold, being able to get a lot more volume in that way. I think a lot of like 1500 to 5K runners, double threshold is like people are doing it and it's working. A lot of marathoners are still kind of not sure if that's like, should they invest that time, or would it be better invested in just like one long threshold run? Um, so like, what are your thoughts on that? And then when you do some double threshold work, what does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, double T's, like I think it's a love-hate relationship because d double T's are really good. Like I see the benefit in them, but they're also really tiring and can be like if you don't run them correctly, they can be really hard and also like, kind of screw you for your next workout and things like that. And just the time that it takes again, you know, um, I think the training aspect of that, I think comes down to just what gives them confidence, right? Like if you feel that double T's like really work for you and your schedule allows for it and you feel good doing them, then yeah, you should do them. But then there's like, like you said, there's people that marathoning are still trying to figure that out because it's like, okay, do I do a double T and get a lot of mileage and like I hit maybe a lot more time in LT1, LT2, or do I want my training to be specific to what a marathon is, and like I need to go do a 10-12 mile tempo because that is the closest thing that's going to replicate that feeling of grinding through a marathon for you know 2 hours kind of thing, and finding that challenge mentally while also stimulating you physically,
Mm-hmm.
um, is kind of that balance. And so there's a handful of pros that don't do double T's. There's other pros that they like always do double T's. Um, I've found that, I was, and it's again learning how to do them correctly because I think a lot of people, I see people on the team, on the Adams team right now is like, coach in the early points of the season, they're doing 2 double T workouts a week. So Tuesday's
Mm-hmm.
a double T and Friday's a double T. And at the beginning, kids are just crushing these workouts, right? And they're like kind of doing kind of what we did, way too much. And then they start to get burnt out and then they like maybe get injured or they can't sustain it because, yeah, like my philosophy on it is that like you should finish the morning workout and it should feel super easy. Like just like, oh, like I could do another, couple sets of this, or you finish and it's kind of like, oh, I didn't feel like I kind of worked out. And then you
Mm-hmm.
come back in the afternoon and you do that workout and it's like, the second workout's a little bit faster and you're like, oh, like this, I feel this morning's workout but I can still finish this. And so
Okay.
typically what I've done, when I first started doing double T's in before the Olympic trials in 2024, I did a double T every Friday and for like 10 weeks straight or something like that. And that kind of took, again, that's like mentally tough because I'm getting up at 6 a.m., getting on the treadmill, doing an hour workout, and then working all day, coming back after that in the afternoon and doing another workout on the track. And they're not like glamorous workouts, right? You're doing like I typically would do when I do double T's, it's like I do 6 miles of work, some combination of 6 miles of tempo at LT1 in the morning. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's like 3 by 2 miles at, for me, like 5:25 to 5:30 pace. with, short rest, minute rest. I've seen people do like 3 by 10 minutes off like a minute rest at LT1. Um, that's, or like sometimes I would do like just 6 miles straight at 5:30, and that kind of like, again, for time's sake, with
Mm-hmm.
like a, 2.5 mile warm up, 2.5 mile cool down. And so you're doing longer reps in the morning at a slower pace. And then you come back in the afternoon, and then you're doing shorter reps at like LT2 or slightly faster pace. So, and that looks like 20 by 400 at like 75, cutting down to like 72 or 70, or like, 13 by 600 or whatever, like combination to kind of hit 6 miles again of work in the
Mm-hmm.
afternoon. But typically shorter, um, shorter reps, a little bit faster, but still short, recovery. So it's like, I'll be in the bubble and I'll do 20 by 400, and I'll do it straight through, and I'll take 45 seconds rest,
Mm-hmm.
and then you go back at it again. And so, um, I think, and I did that a lot back in like 2023, 2024. And this past build, I actually kind of changed that, where it's like I was trying to find that balance of, okay, getting a lot of mileage out of double T's, but then also getting a lot of, um, you know, mental strength, or replicating what a marathon is by doing those longer tempos. So I would do like, so this build I did double T Friday, and then the next week I would alternate. So I'd go like straight tempo, or like big, tempo day, and then the next week do a double T, and then
Okay.
alternate. And that worked for me. Again, sometimes my schedule would be like, well, I can't do a double T today, so I have to do a straight tempo. And so
Mm-hmm.
this next build that I'm going to do, I want to incorporate doing more double T's, um, but because I felt like I missed out on a little bit, but also I see the difference. Like I can feel how much fitter I get by doing them like a lot. Because when I in 2023, before I left, to go to the, trials and go to Florida and kind of prep for that, I was in really good shape, but also that was my first time doing double T's, and I was running a little bit too hard. So instead of running like, those morning sessions at like 5:25 to 5:30, I was running them at like 5:20.
Mm-hmm.
And then I come in the afternoon, I maybe, instead of running like 75 to 72, I'm running like 72 to 68. And I was able to hold on to that, and I got really fit, but also like it it's a fine line there of like, on the verge of injury, or kind of things are bugging you, or that type of thing.
Okay. Sweet. Thank you. That's super in-depth answer. I'm gonna steal some of that. I I last year I messed with it a little bit. Like I would do maybe like 16 times 400 in the morning, and then I was training for trail stuff, so like get on the trails and do like a 6 or 7 mile like aerobic threshold run in the afternoon, which like it's not really 7 miles at threshold because like the nature of the trails is more like a fartlek, um, and like you said, like I felt like I got fit fast doing it, but I was probably also overdoing it and running like because like if you're used to running quarters at 70 down to 65 seconds, so when you're doing them with 45 seconds rest, like I'll run an 80-second quarter and I'm like that's so slow. It feels
Yeah.
really slow, but like you said, if you're dipping over it all the time, then you just pay for it later. So going into the 2028 trials, like this is you've now qualified and you've got like 2 years to spare, right? Or a year and a half to spare. So, do you continue to do what you've done and slowly get better and hope that that's enough to do well at those trials, or is there something do you feel you need to do to get in 210 shape in order to be competitive at those trials?
Hmm.
Because like I'm sure like you ran 215 or 214:59, but you ran a marathon a month ago. Like I'm sure mentally you're thinking you're probably in like 213 shape on a good day. Um, so then what do you do to get 3 minutes faster in a year and a half?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think like for me, it's just how can I keep pushing the envelope just like a little bit, right? Like the one thing that I have really enjoyed about, and I think that's kept me in the game for so long or chasing the dream, is like that I've just always kept just getting a little bit better, right? Where I've seen like what for me, I ran 220 and then I ran 219 and then I ran 217 and then I ran 216 and then 215 and then now it's like 214.59 and I know there's more left in there. And that's kind of what keeps me going. Where compared to like, you and me both have seen people run like, okay, they're a 218 guy, and then all of a sudden they run 211, and
Hmm.
then they never run 211 again, right? Like that's like as much as I would love to do that, it's like I think there's that progression of like, oh, I keep getting a little bit better every year and finding new ways to do that. And so for me, like, you know, at at the marathon project, I went through halfway in 66:50, and I was trying to run sub 214, like in 213. But at mile 17, my calf like twinged and kind of cramped up a little bit, so I had to back off. And I thought I was going to drop out, but I was able to hang on, even though I had to slow down a little bit because I was starting to feel good. Um, so like in my mind, I'm like, oh, like I know I'm in 213, like 30 shape or something like that. But
Hmm.
I ran, I still ran a PR and like I qualified. Glad that's over, um, and have that done. So now looking forward, it's like I don't really need to change much, but there's just little things that I know I need to do. Like I'm always, as soon as I finish the race, in at the marathon project, I was already thinking of like, what do I need to do differently? How can I better like this? Like as soon as my calf cramped at mile 17 during the race, I was like, doubts just shot into my head. I was like, this is way too long of a build. I didn't do enough weights. I should have stayed on it. Like this is what you get, Kris, kind of thing. And like,
Hmm.
because this build I did was 24 weeks, and nobody does a build that long. Like that's but I know I knew I could take that, but I also and and I know that like I can race multiple marathons in a season. Like I ran in 12 weeks. I ran three marathons. I ran Boulderthon, Philadelphia, and then Marathon Project.
Hmm.
Um, and but that's also because I love running. I love racing. The marathon, is something where I get to, you know, in the 1500, you only get to enjoy it for about 4 minutes. But the marathon, you get to enjoy it like racing for 2 hours. And that's what I like about it. And so, but again, finding those things that like in this next build, I need to, I could probably get away with doing not as much mileage. And so maybe doing just like 120 miles a week, but getting more time in the weight room and just being stronger in that way. Because this build, I felt very aerobically strong, but not like my legs were kind of like deficient in that towards the end of the race. I
Hmm.
noticed at Marathon Project, and so it's just tweaking those things. And I think the thing that I'm excited for 2028 and the next 2 years is that, yeah, I've already gotten the Olympic trials qualifier. Now I can go out and I can just take big swings. Like let's do things that are like, you know, um, let's go out with, I want to go compete rather than like I'm really good at time trialing, but I want to compete now more with like people. So like let's get through and like go out with the group rather than kind of like letting them go, or let's kind of take some more risks and see if that can happen. And again, I know myself really well, so I know I need to do these certain workouts. I know I need to do bigger mileage, maybe than most people, but maybe I need to hit on speed a little bit more. I'm going to incorporate weights more in this next build. Uh, I'm going to, we're just me and my coach, like we always just brainstorming ideas and bouncing ideas off each other, and it's not a very set training schedule. It's always kind of like, well, what do you feel like doing this week? What do you need, and that I think also kind of hits on the things that I enjoy and what I like doing, and maybe that also kind of is a weakness of mine because I always choose like strength aerobic work rather than like, oh, coach, we need to do some like 10 by a K off 3 minutes at 3 flat or 255 pace.
Mhm.
So going forward, it's just finding, you know, I've I think if we're talking about mileage, I've found that ceiling, 120 to 130, 130 high works for me and I can handle that. I don't need to go any higher, but now how can we increase the quality of that? Like not necessary because I've played with a lot of different things. And again, what I found is that I just I can, really good workouts, like just mainly just change the workout days, keep the easy days easy, make sure I recover, getting enough sleep. But what are some things that we can kind of throw in there to kind of change things up, keep it fresh and it's also living in Alamosa, lots of different seasons, right? So we have like
Yeah.
summer and fall is like beautiful, really easy to train. Winter is cold outside, maybe a little windy, especially going into spring. I'm going to be spending more time in the bubble. How do we make that interesting? How do we make that like doable for me to still get these high mileage, weeks in when I have to be in the bubble working out or on the treadmill and those types of things. Um, so going forward, yeah, it's just playing with it. And that's what's like fun about it is that's the beauty of the relationship I have with my coach is that, when we first started working together, he like knew nothing about marathoning. And I had to like
Mhm.
kind of teach him or I still am teaching him, but I'm still also learning and he's learning. And it's like this, we have a really good relationship where it's like he'll give me a workout and I'll be like, nah, coach, I can't do that workout up here because I'm not at sea level. Or I'm like, let's not do this and let's change it just slightly. Or he'll do the
Mhm.
same thing for me. And so it's just I think it's just, finding the keeping that progressive overload over the next few years to keep like getting better, but also just keeping things fun and like figuring out what gives me confidence and what I like, and enjoying it because that's the biggest thing. Like as much as I like racing and competing and running the marathon, there's also aspects of just training and like traveling to trips and like sharing experiences with like friends and loved ones that like I really enjoy. That's like a big part of it. Like going and running a major and having like my family come out and like, not a lot of people get to experience a major or experience what it's like to be like in the pro field or go to like a professional technical meeting and like
Mhm.
sharing that is really fun, as well as getting to share, you know, that with like friends from college. Like Sydney, I got to see Sydney at Marathon Project and like I got to see other people, at the trials and so there's that aspect of like how do I keep it still fun and engaging and I enjoy it rather than it feeling like a job.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, I'm super excited like to see you take some swings in the next year. If you are if you are watching, you might notice that we've changed outfits and locations a little bit. Our internet cut out when we were recording a few weeks ago, and it's taken a little bit to get back online with Kris. But thanks for hopping back on, dude.
Yeah, dude, excited to be back on here.
Yeah. So I was wanting to talk to you before we cut out about some of the research you've done with sodium bicarbonate
Mhm.
and how that's kind of a more of a mainstream topic now.
Yeah, uh, definitely that. It's kind of funny because back in, oh gosh, so I started my master's degree in 2017, and I ended up doing my thesis on sodium bicarbonate. But back then, it wasn't really like a as researched and big of a thing as it is nowadays. So even though I didn't really publish anything, I kind of like to think that was on looking at that stuff kind of before everybody else. But I I ended up for my master's degree, I ended up doing my thesis on the effects of chronic versus acute sodium bicarbonate loading on time to exhaustion in endurance athletes or endurance runners. And so what inspired me to do that back in like late 2010s was because when I was in high school, one of my uh, one of my like seniors on the team, his name was Taylor Gusky. I was a sophomore, he was a senior. He just started. He like read on this thing that if you take in a bunch of baking soda it like will help mitigate like lactic acid accumulation and things like that. And so in high school um, we would just put like like huge spoonfuls of baking soda into like a glass of water, and then you just chug it, and then hopefully you don't like crap yourself during your race. And like and we we did that for like a year, or like the spring track season. And then I never really did it again, but I had always kind of thought about it. And then come my master's degree, I had to do something on research. um, and I wanted to first like look at music, and then our like my mentor and good friend Lucas Clawletter was like, he's like, no, that's stupid. Don't do that. Don't do anything with music. I was like, okay, like that's because it's been pretty researched. I get it. And then that came back to me of like, oh, what about like baking soda? And then I started looking at research and kind of gaps in the research of how baking soda can be used for um, like exercise, increasing exercise performance. And a lot of research had been done on like short term, high intensity, even like in all the way, mainly looking at like sprinters, things like that, of how it can be beneficial. And so I had found that not a lot of research had been done on endurance athletes, like long, like if we're talking like 5K, 10K endurance athletes, um, or endurance runners. So I ended up pitching this idea of doing, because there's two different types of loading that you can do, or what I found back then, and was able to use, was chronic and acute loading. Um, and so chronic loading would be, say you have a race on Friday, or sorry, you have a race on Saturday, like typical track cross country race on Saturday. Monday through Friday, you load sodium bicarb at zero point 0.5, yeah, it's 0.5 grams per kilogram of body weight in like 750 milliliters of water. And so you would do that every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you don't take anything on Saturday. Uh, and then you have acute loading, where you don't take anything Monday through Friday, but the 90 minutes before your race, you take zero point 0.3 grams of sodium bicarbonate per kilogram of body weight. And so the reasoning behind this is like, first off, bicarbonate is the first line of defense against lactic acid accumulation or hydrogen ions, and so that burning feeling you start to feel in your legs. Uh, and so if the idea is that if we can load the bicarbonate stores in the body, in the muscle, then we can neutralize more lactic in order to uh, increase or decrease RPE, increase heart rate, increase lactic accumulation, and increase time to exhaustion. It's really like the four big ones I looked at for variables. But mainly like you can push your body harder um, to get like just to improve performance before like lactic really like shuts you down in like those 1500 5K races. And so, but the problem with taking in a bunch of bicarbonate is that it's a very basic substance, and sodium bicarbonate, it's salty. You take in a lot of it, uh, it's going to pull water into your like large intestine, and then which causes and your stomach, and causes gastrointestinal distress. So you have all these different symptoms of bloating, burping, diarrhea, um, uh, side cramps, things like that. So really anything that can go under gastrointestinal distress, GI distress. And so then I was looking at, okay, is it more beneficial to take to acute load? But the problem there is that then you're going to most likely have GI distress for your race, compared to if you chronic load the days before, you deal with the uh, sodium bicarbonate, like GI distress for those days, but you don't have to deal with anything on the day of the race, but you still load your bicarbonate stores, and you should see some sort of improvement in performance. And what I found after doing, I mean, it was all like randomized. I did a control group or like a placebo group, acute loading and chronic loading tests. So I did 3 tests on every participant. I believe there was 10 participants. Um, and with the results that I found, time to exhaustion increased by 26% when chronic loading sodium bicarbonate. Uh, and how I figured out how I figured out time to exhaustion was I ran all my participants through a VO2 max test, and then I figured out their lactate threshold pace. So say like, somebody's pace was 530 for their lactate threshold at a given heart rate. I then ran them, their time to exhaustion test was 110% of their lactate threshold. So it would be like, I don't know, 520 pace, let's say, if it was 530 or 515, something like that, whatever 10% is less or more. So it would be running 10% faster with the idea of that they'd be on the goal was like to have them on the treadmill for like 30 to 60 minutes. There was one instance where I had an athlete like on there for like 75 minutes. But again, I was blinded. The participants were blinded, so nobody knew what they were taking. I didn't know what they were taking, as I had a research assistant figuring all that out. And then there was only one other instance where somebody almost crapped themselves on the treadmill and they had to like stop mid and go. And I was like, okay, I assumed that was like acute loading
Yeah.
in the moment. But yeah, that was something I looked at back in 2019 when I conducted my study, and I remember watching like, was it like the 2020 Tokyo Olympics or in 2021? I was watching some major championship for track and field, and like Maurten put out like this commercial of their bicarb when they first released their bicarb, and I was like, holy shit! Like I like studied this and then I looked at what they were doing, and they have different, for the Maurten bicarb system, they have different levels, like, for how many kilograms you weigh, there's a specific, amount of the bicarb that you should be taking that you can pre-buy.
Mm-hmm. And their system, is it basically the chronic loading or?
It's a little bit less, I
Mm-hmm.
think. Like I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was like zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.3. So it's more like acute loading because everybody takes it like 2 hours or 3 hours or 90 minutes before the race. But the I believe what they were pitching, or what they are pitching, is that because of the hydrogel
Mm-hmm.
and the way the bicarbonate pellets are, like you don't get the GI distress because of like the hydrogel that they use, and also you're not using a ton of sodium bicarb like I did, like my loading protocol.
Mm-hmm. So they're saying it's better than just taking straight baking soda because the hydrogel is helping it get past the initial like upset stomach, right? Because
Yes,
you're
exactly.
absorbing it slower as you're breaking down the gel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Do you think that is true and works? Have you messed with the Maurten stuff yourself?
I've I've actually done both. My loading protocol, I ran the Boston 5K last year in February, and me and Brandon, my training partner, Birdsong, we loaded bicarbonate for 5 days prior,
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, oh, like we're getting ready for a track race. I hadn't run a track race in a while, and I was like, well, it's going to be really high intensity, so let's just try to mitigate all this, neutralize all this lactic acid, and then I've also done the Maurten bicarb, and like I don't like doing the Maurten bicarb because I mean I've heard people talk about it, but it's really hard to get down. Like you mix it all together, and like I'm almost throwing up because it's like there's the consistency, and I'm not a big fan of Maurten because it's the way it tastes and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so I've done both. It's um I mean, the GI distress with my loading protocol was like really rough for those 5 days. And then, I don't know if it made a difference on race day. I wasn't also in like the best shape back then, but then I have used the Maurten bicarb, and it's like, again, I don't know. I've heard people on like the current like Adams team talk about it because they take it before like big races, like when they went to Notre Dame, and like before nationals and things like that, they'll take it. And there's like Kiddis, or I think Ava's talked about it, and they're like, oh, I can feel a difference. Like I can push myself more. But
Mhm.
and now again, are you actually feeling those things, or is it more placebo? What do
Right.
you
I
think?
wonder how did the placebo group do?
That was kind of like the baseline, and depending on the athlete, acute acute loading sometimes allowed for better performance, but also sometimes allowed for worse performance compared to the control group because of GI distress.
So what
Um,
did you use in your placebo to get the GI distress without giving the bicarb?
it was the placebo or the control group had just like sodium chloride. So everything
Okay.
tasted the same roughly.
Hmm.
So when they would drink it, they couldn't be like, oh, well, this is, sodium bicarbonate. This is sodium chloride. I have like, uh, and so they were just drinking salty water
Okay.
prior to it. But but yeah, the 26% increase is from the chronic loading group to a chronic loading protocol to the control protocol.
Okay. So basically you have your chronic loading, which is every day you're drinking, you said 750 mLs of water with zero point 0.5 grams per kilogram. So,
Mhm.
and is that just throughout the day? They're sipping it?
They, I think what I did was that they had to drink it within like 2 hours.
Okay.
So like they had to come by my research assistant's office, and he would give them their bottle, and then
Hmm.
they had to drink it within 2 hours.
I see. Because
Yeah.
you don't want it just dissipating through their system
Yeah.
slowly. You want it
Mhm.
a lot at once.
Mhm.
And what is that roughly the equivalent of? You have a bottle of water with maybe a couple of spoonfuls of baking soda.
Yeah, I mean, like it tastes like salty seawater. Like that's
Uh-huh.
kind of like
Okay.
what I would compare it to. But yeah, it's just
Okay.
like really salty water.
Hmm. And then so that's the chronic group. The acute group, they're drinking a slightly less concentrated version, pretty much just but right before their warm up for the race.
Yeah, like yeah, I believe it was like 90 minutes or 2 hours before we would do the time to exhaustion test, and they had to drink it within a certain amount of time. Again, I can't remember exactly. Maybe they had to drink it within like 20 or 30 minutes.
Hmm.
Um, but then like to blind them, they still had to be ingesting. The acute group still had to ingest, um, their bottles Monday through Friday, but it was just sodium chloride in there
Okay. Yeah.
to make them think that, you know, they were still
Right, because
getting
then they
something.
know, yeah, then they know I'm in the acute group, so I might be getting a different effect
Yeah,
if they
yeah,
if they weren't blinded.
yeah.
Okay, and then so then it sounds like what you found was the chronic loading group was more successful.
hmm
Oh,
it increased time to exhaustion by 26%, like on average for all participants, and it also decreased RPE slightly. I don't know if it was significant enough, but it I did see like a trend of decreasing their rating of perceived exertion, as well as I believe we saw a slight increase in lactate like production, like millimoles at the end of exercise. They were able to produce more lactate or have more lactate in their system at the end of it.
okay. Um, and so the Maurten gel does sort of a mix of the two, it sounds like.
Hmm.
Or if you buy their system and follow all of the instructions,
Yeah,
that's sort of what
it
it
would
does.
be very similar to like the acute loading.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, and based on your study, based on your experience, based on professional performances in the last couple of years, it's pretty obvious that this works.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think just from other athletes they use it, sponsored by it, that it, yeah, they feel a difference and that it does work. And I think that's been, yeah, like more and more people are figuring out like what are these other things I can do to improve performance.
Hmm. And then I think the running world is sort of past this. I remember a couple years ago when it was starting to be sort of like a hot topic of, oh, all the pros are using bicarb, and they're setting world records and doing, cool stuff, especially like 3K to 5K, which it sounds like that's where most of the research is in that range. Um, and so people were saying, oh, is this performance enhancing? Like, and if it's performance enhancing, is it ethical, or is it? 'Cause, I mean, then you get into the topic of like, what is? I mean, food is performance enhancing, right? And baking soda is just
Yeah.
a food. Like, if you don't eat, you have worse performance. So initially, where did you stand on that, doing this research, and then maybe now has your opinion changed, or is it the same?
Uh, Initially, it's, I mean, and my opinion's always been it's the same. I mean, it's not. I think if we want to get the most out of our bodies with everything like that, I mean, obviously, like legally and health-based wise, like that we can. Um, and so I never thought of it as like cheating or unethical thing because you're you still you still have to ingest it and put it in your body and like and yeah you can like it can help with this, but uh it's I mean different, it's not going to harm the body either if
Right,
you
except for the GI distress, which
besides the GI distress
in
if you
which
take
case
too much.
like pizza should be banned.
Yeah, yeah, right.
So yeah,
Like, yeah, well, I mean, spicy food in, anything.
yeah.
Um, so that's my, yeah, my view on it hasn't changed at all because it's yeah, it's within food and like it's just chemistry in that sense. But I mean, then you could argue that there's, it's chemistry in, EPO or blood doping or like those types of things. But so it does there is that like blurred line of what is. I mean, it's the same thing as like caffeine. Like, okay, there's only a certain amount of caffeine that you're allowed to like that WADA allows you to take in. It's like what
Hmm.
is it like 600 or 800 milligrams in your body or in your system.
Yeah,
And
quite a bit.
so yeah, like it's and but yeah, it's not on the banned substance list or anything like that. So
Right.
uh, it's just more of like yeah, you know, take it at your own risk, practice with it, those types of things.
Hmm. So if somebody was um, wanting to, they've never used sodium bicarb, they've heard about it, and they wanted to start taking it or using it to help in a race, how would you recommend they start using it and practice it, and what would be like the easiest way?
Um, Depends how much money you got. No, I guess because using that bicarb stuff is if you're using Maurten, it does cost a good amount like to use their formula. I know I've seen some other stuff. Um, Blank Sports Nutrition has their own like hydrogel bicarb system that you can buy that I've been kind of looking at. I think that's a bit cheaper. There's just more and more companies coming out with like cheaper options. Um, I mean, but typically what I've seen people do or what I would recommend is yeah, if you're going to do the Maurten, buy a pack of it and use it once or twice in some pretty heavy, intense workouts. If you're doing like an interval session, like VO2 max work, uh, practice with that in those sessions, um, because that's going to be pretty representative of performance, race things like that. And so you'd want to practice it a few times, get an idea of it, and you definitely don't want to take it just going right into a race and you realize like you don't like the consistency or you can't get it down or it makes you throw up. Like you don't want any of those variables to like affect performance in that way. So that would be my recommendation. There is uh, there is a like home recipe you can make, and I don't know it off the top of my head. Birdsong, he he did it, or he's created or found, his buddy sent it to him with like a recipe of like bicarb, like sugar, xanthan gum, and like something else, and it's actually supposed to mitigate those GI distress things, symptoms. And so, but it's a lot cheaper way to do that. And you could probably find it on like Let's Run or some place, or I mean, if I get my hands on it, I can send it to you, Glassy. So
Sure.
if anybody asks, but he was practicing with that for a bit, in last spring, of kind of using that, and it seemed to work, and it was a bit easier to get down, didn't have those GI problems. And so that could be, but my biggest thing is just figure out what works for you, and practice with it. I mean, it's the same thing as like fueling for, let's say, like a marathon or ultra or something like that. Like there's a ton of different options, ton of different, gels, fuel, carbohydrate rich drink you could use, but there's going to be some that you like, some that you don't like. What works for you? Just keep practicing.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, I remember 2016, 2017, when you were thinking about doing that for research, or maybe you and some teammates just playing with it a little bit, and drinking just like baking soda in water. And I was like, yeah, I already have so many issues with my stomach running. I'm not gonna mess with that for the, maybe a couple of percent that it would help someone. Um, and then yeah, I texted you a couple years ago when I started to see it become really popular, because I was like, didn't you do a study on this years ago? Um, and I think you explained to me that like prior to your study, all of the research was like on pretty short distance stuff and clearing, really like anaerobic, the results of really anaerobic work, or maybe with like cyclists doing, some sprints. And so your study is maybe the earliest one that I could find that was focused on runners, over doing something longer than 5K, um, and with high level runners. That's something that working at Adams State you have access to, is, there's always 10 to 20 what could be classified as elite athletes right around the corner, and a lot of universities might not have that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just using like redshirt freshmen, or really anybody redshirting on the team. And yeah, I'm kind of, now that like all this stuff has came out on it, I was like, man, I'm really kicking myself that I didn't like publish my my research back then. But I was so done with it at that point. I was like, I don't care. I'm just gonna like get my degree, be done.
Hmm. Is there anything happening in sports science now that you're kind of excited about, or is that equally you think could be performance enhancing, or that you've seen people start to research that's cool?
Um, I haven't really looked too much into that stuff. Um, I would say just more like training training based, like modality, like training based things, such as like double T's and different ways to do workouts, long runs. Like that's kind of been more of the stuff I've been looking at. But within like the sports science stuff, um, it's, going to like the Rocky Mountain ACSM conferences and seeing what other like universities in the kind of Rocky Mountain area are doing for research. There's like a few people that are like looking at, yeah, how performance can be increased through, different things, such as like how much is like the, Nike Dragonflies increasing performance compared to what we ran in like 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Uh, and then there's been a few things, but nothing I've like really seen that's gotten me excited, but I also haven't really been looking.
Right, right. Um, yeah, I listened to something recently about, the foam in the shoes being probably or possibly what was more beneficial towards like the Nike 4%. the Vaporflies, than the actual carbon plate. Have you seen anything about that?
Well, like I guess like talking about the different foams that are in like super shoes now. Uh, the biggest thing being that we can just like recover quicker
Hmm.
between workouts and things like that. And like, yeah, the carbon plate like helps give some energy return, but it's more and like maybe protects the bottom of our feet, in some like you could probably argue that way, but also mainly it's just like the foam absorbing the shock and taking that eccentric load off her legs when we're running and then giving it back to us when we're pushing off.
Sure.
But that's from what I've just like know looking at a few things.
Uh, what's something just in running in general that you're excited about that anybody's doing?
Oh, it's funny you asked this because I thought about this after listening to J. Cole's podcast last night, and I was like, man, how would I answer that question? Um, I would say, I think just the just how big I'm a marathoner, so like just how big like marathons are getting and how much more competitive they are. Um, even just looking like, because that's a lot of what I look at is like what other pro marathoners are doing and like what they're doing for obviously like workouts and but I think the whole marathoning scene of how deep and how fast guys are running and the fields that they're putting together, like the men's Boston field just got announced like just last week, and so it's like seeing how deep that field is with all those guys, and I'm one of the lucky one to be on that start list for the pro field. So I think for me, it's seeing how fast everybody's running, what they're able to do, and how we can, maybe keep for me like keep pushing the boundaries of how often you can kind of race a marathon too.
Right. Do you think that has to do with both the just the field getting so much bigger, and the ability to race more within a year? Do you think that has to do with both shoe advances and training advances?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think people believing that they can do it too. And especially when you get people like Sarah Hall that she ran like I don't even know how many marathons in 2025, but she did like 3 marathons, like high level marathons in the fall last year, I'm pretty sure. And so people like seeing that evidence, but also like and believing in that, but also what they're doing in training and the accumulation of training over years and years just like toughens your body up so that it's like, oh, I can race a marathon at like and really race it and then 4 to 6 to 8 weeks later come back and do it again and be okay.
Right. Yeah, I had an athlete that they ran a marathon and asked me how long they should take off after, and I kind of told them like, let's take a few days, and then the next week, if you feel like running a little bit, um, then and slowly just kind of build up to running again within a couple of weeks. Um, and they said they were like, well, I looked it up online and it said to take like a month off. Um, and I I guess that's kind of just what the research used to say because it would beat you up so badly that if I mean especially if it was like the longest and hardest effort you've ever had, you would need a month to recover from that. And so yeah, I think it's maybe the shoes. Maybe people are fueling better and training smarter as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at the shoes that people were racing in, like even 10, 12, 14 years ago before the 4% came out, they they were like pretty minimal. And then you look back towards like the 80s and what those guys were running in, it's like like very thin flats over like that amount of time, and like it would blow you up. And I remember like when I raced my first marathon, it took me a week of no running to then be able to just like recover enough to run for like 30 minutes. I remember like I ran CIM on that Sunday, waited 5 days, tried running on Friday just for like 30 minutes easy, and I made it like a mile from the house, and I my legs cramped up, and I had to walk home. And and I didn't, and I wasn't even in the Nikes back then. I was in was I think like Reebok came out with a shoe or something, and so I was like, and that's what like me and Lauren and Kyle all wore for CIM, and then but then since then, like obviously shoes have gotten better, and now it's like now I can go like a day or two after a marathon and then just kind of like build back up into full training. It'd be good.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember that too. I don't think I ever ran a marathon before the Vaporflies, with like good cushioning, like the Vaporfly 2 or 3. Um, but I ran a couple of half marathons with like the New Balance 1500 or 1400, which were just like a pretty thin, lightweight flat. And same thing, I would be limping around for a couple of days with my calves just like knots. Okay. You mentioned you're running Boston in March. You just got accepted into the pro field, or they just announced that you were accepted into the pro field. Um, that's super exciting. This is your second or third time in that pro field?
Second time I ran in 2024.
Okay. So how are you gonna prep for it this time? Are you gonna change anything? Are you wanting to take risks or anything like that?
Yeah, good question. Uh, last last time I ran Boston was what was that like 2.5 months after the trials, and I dropped out of the trials due to like cramping and things like that. And then I kind of like got back into training, and I had like an okay build going into Boston, and I ran like 2:18 and like finished, and it was like a weaker year, I would say. It wasn't as deep of a field. I was ninth American, 19th overall, I think. Still pretty cool, but it was just a really great experience. And so going into this build, I'm like 3 or 4 weeks in right now. And I it's a bit different than my last build. My last build was like 24 weeks long, and now this one's like I think we're 12 weeks out from this past Monday, so it's a lot shorter, which I think is going to help me a lot more. Uh, Gonna keep my mileage about like 120, but probably not go up to like in the 130s for this build. And I'm gonna prioritize because of that. I'm gonna prioritize like weights, like kind of what we were talking about before, being in the weight room, getting stronger that way, and then going into Boston, I think I could still PR, and I think I can run 214 or even 213. But I don't want to go out chasing a time. I just want to go compete because of how deep that field is, and I get to race against some people that I've been wanting to race against like for a while, and having a crack at them as well as like. And again, when I ran Boston last time, like, oh, I got to race against like an international field, and this time around, I feel like it's a legit international field, and uh, I'm just excited to go see what I can do, go compete, try not to run alone again for the last 10K, and so be there with people, and then just like take that whole experience in because that's right next to the Olympic trials. Like Boston in 2024 was like the coolest marathon racing experience like I've ever had because of like the fans, the atmosphere, everything. And so I'm excited to like do that, enjoy it, go go kind of throw my hat in the ring, push myself, and like then also having family and friends out there with me this time will be like make it that much more special too.
Awesome, dude. I think you'll
Mhm.
do well after all the strength this winter. Being as Alamosa is flat, and we were just talking about some nostalgia. Where are you gonna go around to prep for some of those hills?
That's if as long as the weather like cooperates, I kind of did this last time, but I'll probably go to like Fort Fort Garland and do some like long runs out there, like around like the to get some hills in. I might go out there and do some like hill reps. Uh, but that would probably be more like on the weekends, just like right now with my teaching schedule and stuff like that. I don't have the time to get a run or workout in and drive to like all the way like 30 minutes out to Fort Garland and back. So um, that'll be that'll be part of it. Probably some treadmill workouts like that I can get some hill running in there, and then but mainly just kind of hoping that the the weight the stuff I'm doing in the weight room is going to kind of help with that too.
So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
um, who's a runner that you admire or that you think is doing something really cool in the sport right now?
Um. Oh man, that's like maybe I'm a little biased because I've been listening to these podcasts that you've been putting out with with Sydney and J. Cole and then obviously seeing like what you're doing. And it just we've talked about this, but like going kind of reminiscing about like the good old days in college back in like 2015, 2016. But I think it's really cool that uh, you, Sid, and J. Cole all live together, but now like in college, and now you guys are all like still pursuing running to like some degree. Uh, I think watching your all three of your guys' careers in running and like how that's like unfolding has been really fun to watch and just also like having that connection back to back in the day kind of thing. So, but outside of I would say the core group of guys, um, I, I'm trying to think like you know who's been doing some cool stuff that like I've been following um, you know I think just it's cool seeing people like figure out the marathon. Like Aiden Reed would be like one person that like I'm like a small fan of, uh, seeing his progression and things like that, as well as like Reed Fisher and like kind of like those guys up in Boulder, like because there's obviously like a lot of them, and even like up to like Joe Klecker of how like transparent he is with like his training and like what he's doing and seeing him like work out with like Helen O'Beary, but also um, I think that with his like newsletter that he puts out every week is like it's cool to see people be transparent of like what they're doing and what they're trying and like that progression, especially coming from like the track and trying something new. Um, and like I like even coming up in the next what in March, New York City half marathon, I think Grant Fisher is making his debut. So like seeing these newer marathoners or half marathoners like making that transition is it's going to be exciting to see how fast they can run.
Right, right. No, I'm excited to see that too. Like, um, I think the story for years and years has been like we always go, how come Americans are fast on the track and not so much in the marathon? And um, Kenyans and Ethiopians seem to move to the marathon faster. There you'd see a lot more guys who are in their early 20s pursuing that because there's more incentive there. So it's kind of cool to see some Americans shoot for it at a younger age while they're still in the prime versus I think it was Grant Fisher, I think, that in a quote I saw recently said like he doesn't want to like crawl under the marathon or crawl under the roads when he's 35, um, which that's sort of what I did. Is I always like waited too long before I changed events. I think I wanted to like chase the shorter, faster stuff. Um, I appreciate that you included me in the runners you admire with Sydney and Jackson. I feel like they're both have had so much more success than I have, and it's just like fun being a fan of them as my friends. And it's fun being a fan of you as my friend as well, and seeing your growth over the years, um, and just like how excited you are about running that you've gotten to get really good at it, just based on like that excitement and knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think it's hard not to be a fan of anybody that has interacted with or come through Adam State in some way or another. and is still like kind of chasing the dream. Like a big one, I I a big one that that I think about a lot often is like Aaron Denzio, and
Hmm.
like he's been fighting like some injury stuff and like wanting to get back, and he qualified in 2018 or 2019 uh, for the trials, and then he's kind of been trying to come back with it, and it's always just fun talking with people that get it, like that get what the grind and like what it's like to be at like Alamosa and training and like and trying to like pursue that. And so it's fun to surround yourself with like those like-minded people and like be fans of each other.
Yeah. Do you remember we used to we copied some drills from Aaron uh in like 2016, and we would call it Din's grind. Because or Dinzio's drills. Um but yeah, I mean he was second at USA Cross I think in 2015 or 16. Um
Yeah,
and so yeah, to see him just continue to, even with a lot of struggles, like push through and find ways to work and still run and try to keep getting better at it.
as we
Um,
all are.
yeah, yeah, right. You wrote a piece about running um, in like 2015 that I remember you shared with us after it's just like a really nice long run as a team. Um, and I asked you to dig it up, and somehow you were able to find that. Like I looked through old emails, I looked through because I had asked you for it back then, and you sent it to me somewhere. Um, but I wondered if you could, just talking about, since we've talked about college running and like being a part of that and working hard, if you could read that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Back this was I have I have it yeah, I found it, this little poem or whatever you want to call it, back deep in my notes on my iPhone, and like I'd kept all these obviously like notes through iCloud. Um, but when you had asked me about it, I'd forgotten, and I was like, I don't know where that is. Probably on like my old college email. Like it's probably lost. And I looked on my Drive, my Google Drive. I looked on the emails like where I could have sent it. But then yeah, I was like maybe it's in my notes, and so I pulled it up and I was able to find it today. I sent it to you, but yeah, I had the date and everything. It was 8/16/2015, and I gotten inspired back then. I would say I was maybe more of like I was talking with my best friend Connor about this like just last night, of like back then like I was maybe more in touch with my emotions, more of like a hopeless romantic or something, and I did like more like creative work, and poetry was like kind of one of them. But this was something I had thought of in the middle of like a long run, which we had like started at like 7 a.m. or something.
Right. Well,
And
let me I wanted to, you said something that made me think of why I asked you to look it up, and um I said even if it's embarrassing or if you're, to share something from that long ago. Um I have always liked that you're such a fan of running, and um there are a lot of people who are into running who are good runners, but they're afraid to admit how much they like it. Like it's not cool to be really into something, or it's not cool to try hard. And you're like the antithesis of that. Like you're really into it. You think it's cool to try hard. You think it's cool to work hard. You think it's cool to be into something. And I really appreciate that. So that's why I asked you to look that up again.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this definitely came to me, like I said, in the middle of like a long run, and it was like one of those just perfect. I can remember like some of the pictures too, like that we had taken back in the day, of just like the perfect summer August morning, like where the sun's coming up over like Blanca, and it's like super calm, but like perfect weather. And I titled this "Silence." Here it goes. Not a word is said among them in the early miles of the morning. Only the pitter-patter of 36 rubberized soles striking the washboarded dirt at each their own cadence. No one person is pushing the pace, and no one person falling off pace. A tight-knit pack in perfect balance that is only as strong as the weakest member. And not one of them is weak. With only 3 days till the new season starts, Many are realizing this is the end of the trials of miles and only the beginning of the miles of trials. This is the church of the Sunday long run. This is the beginning of an ever-fleeting moment. This is Adams State Cross Country. Signed, a grizzly among many.
Nice, dude. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a really nice note to end on. Just like I said, I really appreciate how much you love the sport and how you just continue to push through it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate you sitting down for a while. I appreciate you coming back to sit down for a bit again. It's really nice to catch up, and I'm really excited to see what you're going to do this year.
Yeah, this is a blast. I've really enjoyed listening to you and the other guests that you've had on the podcast so far, and it's nostalgic for me, but it's also just, I don't know, it's just also good just to hang out and have a good reason to talk to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, dude. We'll see you.
See ya.